from my experience working with athletes, after you get them going and you start making those adjustments, they feel better. They're able to move better. They're getting sick less. It can affect the family too. There's all these other things that come from good nutrition.
Nutrition is about more than just performance. It's about how you recover, how you think, and how long you can stay at your best. This is the Optimizing Human Performance podcast. In this episode, we're joined by a performance dietitian, former US Army Ranger, and someone who spent over 2 decades working inside elite military and human performance programs, Dr. Nick Barringer.
Do a lot of injury prevention work. Do a lot of stabilization, the not so sexy stuff. This sort of stuff takes a lot of people out. So the more you can work on your stability under load, the better off you are.
We get into the science that underpins it all and the supplements that can make a real difference.
It helps you produce more ATP, so more energy for muscle contractions, even stuff like brain health and even longevity.
If you care about performing better, recovering faster, and staying in the game longer, this episode will show you what actually works. Hi, Nick. Welcome to the Optimizing Human Performance podcast. How's it going?
It's going wonderful. I'm really excited. I'm glad we were able to, make this happen. So thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. It's great to have you here. Can you start us off? Can you give us a background? Who are you? Where are you? What do you do professionally?
Yeah, so my background is I'm a performance dietitian, nutritional physiologist. So I have my undergrad in nutrition, registered dietitian here in the United States, but then my doctorate in kinesiology, so exercise science. And I currently reside in Houston, Texas, and I do a mix of working in academia and teaching, but then also as a consultant for human performance. And then I work with a human performance company on occasion, O2X Human Performance, where we go around and we, help teach tactical athletes how to be their best self.
Awesome. You've been in the military yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about that background?
Yeah, I was in the military for 21 years in the Army, so it was a lot of fun. Had a lot of opportunities to work with different groups and individuals. So I was in the Ranger Regiment for 5 years. Had the opportunity to do that, which was really really cool. It's a direct action special operations unit within the military here in the U.S. And so that kind of was my entry into really high performance in the tactical setting, and was worked with that unit. And then at the end of my time there, I had a tremendous opportunity to go to Texas A&M University and work under a gentleman, Dr. Rick Kreider, who had done a lot of the initial creatine research, at least here, which we always got to say, the UK brought us creatine, Dr. Roger Harris, right? Give credit where credit's due. And so did a lot of great research there in the exercise support nutrition lab there at A&M. And then after that, I went and taught in the military at the Baylor Army Nutrition Program, was able to go up to the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, do some research there. Then I had the wonderful opportunity to teach at West Point, United States Military Academy there. And then I finished out my career as the program director for the master's program in nutrition. So basically, if you came into the Army and you wanted to be a dietitian and you had done your undergrad in nutrition, you would come into our program, you would, hang out with us. We would teach you how to, be a military officer and also be a dietitian. And then it was really cool. You get your master's degree from Baylor University. That was our educational partner. So that's my career in a nutshell.
That's awesome. That's great. In the UK in particular, we don't have uniformed dietitians in that way. It's not that they're not members of the military. We do have nutritionists. We have people who support that way with dietetics and nutrition. You mentioned creatine. Let's just do a quick deep dive. Creatine's a hot topic. I remember doing sports science and sports nutrition 20 plus years ago, and the Greenhalgh studies and back then about creatine. It seems to have passed the test of time. It's a supplement that's well researched and well developed. Can you tell us about it? For those people who've never heard of creatine, what's the deal, and should they be taking it?
Yeah. So, creatine monohydrate is one, to make sure what we're talking about. There's different versions. You'll see supplement companies try to sell creatine ethyl ester, creatine crealkaline, all these, but really it's creatine monohydrate. the research supports, you know, amino acid found in your meat, your chicken. You know, you're getting it when you're eating animal products. It's just easier to get it at a much higher level when you supplement. And what was found is, you know, it helps you produce more ATP, so more energy for muscle contractions. But now even stuff like brain health, cognitive health. So not only strength and power, um, and even longevity in terms of like now, you know, if you'd have told me this when I first learned about creatine, that I would have my 77-year-old mother on creatine monohydrate, I wouldn't have, you know, guessed it. But now I have her taking it. She feels better cognitively. She feels stronger. So it's really become one of those kind of supplements that is for the masses.
Is there any potential downsides to creatine? Is there any populations or maybe medical conditions that mean people shouldn't take it, or is it pretty much universal for everyone?
Definitely, it's one you'd want to check with your physician. I don't want to say I know every medical condition that's potentially out there, but as far as for most people, it's a great option. The side effect, the big side effect that's been proven time and time again is weight gain. Now that's not fat mass, but I would say particularly for these populations you're talking about, like the tactical athlete, if you're on the borderline for a run time, for a ruck time, and there's a concern that that extra mass might slow you down, you kind of got to do that cost exchange, then that might be an athlete I would consider, you know, try it, see how you affect, track your time, track your run time. If the other kind of category would be weight class athletes, so fighters, if you have to be in a certain, so I know fighters will sometimes get off of creatine to make weight, and then they get back on it. But otherwise, I mean, it's safe, it's effective. There's been a lot of great papers recently looking at side effects, and you know, one found that the side effects from creatine monohydrate were the same as a placebo.
Is there any benefit in sort of hydration status? If you're taking if you're taking creatine, does that mean that there's more water in the system, and potentially if you go into a
Yeah.
hot climate, is it a way of potentially avoiding dehydration because you're preloading with more water? Is that a thing?
Yes, that's 100% a thing. And originally, when it first came out, especially in the military settings, it was banned in a lot of the kind of assessment and selections because they were worried about it dehydrating people. Since then, there's been multiple studies that show, to your point exactly, that it can improve thermal regulation because you're able to retain more of that fluid, you know, kind of in the cells. So as long as you're drinking enough water, there's no concern of dehydration with creatine monohydrate.
Awesome. That's good news. That's good news. I occasionally take creatine. It's one of those things that I don't do consistently, but I'm always told I should. Whenever I've spoken to nutritionists, they always say it's the go-to. Get those 5 grams or 10 grams, whatever it is, into you. Get healthier.
So, Nick, obviously you're a dietitian, but you've also graduated from a US Army Ranger School. So, can you give us an insight into not only the 75th Ranger Regiment, but also the nature of a Ranger School itself?
Yeah, so the Ranger School is, you know, U.S. Army Ranger School is the military's what's called, it's like premier leadership school. And what it does is it takes, you know, individuals from, you know, all sorts of different ranks, from enlisted to officer, and you go in and probably like a lot of courses in other militaries across the globe, you become a roster number, right? You're a given roster number. No longer do you have that rank in the name. You're a roster number like everybody else, and then you're given tasks and missions to do in groups and in teams, and your leadership skill in different roles is going to be evaluated by a grader, and you get, you know, go and no go on a lot of those tasks. Going into it, there's certain physical tasks, runs, rucks. They just changed up some of the physical requirements to get in. But, you know, you've got a basic, you know, kind of called a wrap week where you're doing a bunch of physical assessments to get through. And then once you're in there, you're in a platoon, and then you're given different tasks. And so you do these tasks in Columbus, Georgia, or Fort Benning. Then you go up to the mountains, and there's a mountain phase where you're doing these other type of mission sets and learning how to live and fight in the mountains. And then you go down to Florida, which is the swamps. And so you're learning how to operate as a team kind of in the swamps. And again, the whole time you're getting assessed. Sleep is restricted. So, you could be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a night to maybe to no time to sleep really, depending on how your mission went. And then calories are also restricted in that when you're in the field operating, you're getting 2 MREs. With MRE, a meal's ready to eat, what we provide, you're looking at 1,200 calories. So you might get 2,000 400 calories for that day, but when you look at research with Ranger School, we're probably burning anywhere from 5 to 7,000 calories. The weight loss is another kind of side effect of that school.
When you're going through the Ranger training, are they looking to develop skills within individuals, or is it very much a case of putting people under pressure, obviously making sure they're sleep deprived and calorific deficit, to see how they respond under pressure and what their leadership's like? Is that sort of the intent of the program?
Yeah, I mean, there's training. There's definitely training involved, and you learn. It's hard to retain some of it in that state, but the primary goal is the leadership aspect. In that, we don't know each other. Let's imagine you drop us in Ranger School, roster numbers, we don't know anything about our background, whatever. And now you guys, you gentlemen, you're sleep deprived and you're hungry, and I'm going to try to motivate you to do this mission, where you might not be getting evaluated. And so there's a little bit of that, like, how you treat people, because the other big component is the peer evaluations. So you get evaluated by the instructors, but then you also evaluate each other, and we would rate each other from 1 to 3, and if you're at the bottom, the very bottom, you could get peered out and have to recycle. If that happens enough, you could get kicked out of the school, because they want good team players. And what they don't want is the term spotlight ranger. And it's that person that, when you guys ask me to do something, I'm a complete, crap bag. I'm not going to do it. I'm not, then as soon as the instructors come around, I'm like running around. I'm like, yeah, let's go, guys, let's do.
Yeah,
And
we
that
call
kind of
those
behavior.
DS watchers.
Yeah,
DS watchers in the
watchers,
Yeah,
team.
yeah, right.
110%.
So that's where those peer evals come in, because you guys are gonna be like, no, Nick's not carrying his load. And that's what I really love about the school, because there's no hiding, right? There's no hiding. So you got to be a good, teammate, and also get through the evaluation.
Nick, I imagine there's not many dietitians that have gone through Ranger School. Would that be correct?
At the time, I was the first and only one, and then it took about a decade, and we just had another one to go through.
Okay. So what was your motivation? Why did you decide that that was the path for you at the time?
Well, I mean, there's really no. I won't take any credit, because I was in the 75th Ranger Regiment, and to be a leader in the 75th Ranger Regiment, the standard is you get your Ranger tab. And that is something funny, and I'll tell a quick story that, again, some might appreciate. So I go and I do this thing. I go through Ranger School. I graduate. Because I was a dietitian, it was kind of a big deal. And so, like, the head dietitian of the Army, she was at my, like, Ranger School graduation, and they did a story about it. Like, oh, the first dietitian to graduate Ranger School. So I'm like feeling like, all right, yeah. And I get back to Ranger Regiment, and this medic goes, everybody's congratulating me, and he goes, "Hey, congratulations, sir. You just accomplished what every private and Ranger regiment has to do," and walked off. And he's funny. We were friends, but it was a great reminder. It was a great, like, hey, you didn't do anything special, buddy. That's the standard. You just met the standard. Good job. And that attitude is why I love Ranger Regiment. Wait, because that describes it right there. There is, there's the standard. You're expected to meet the standard, and you're not going to get any extra accolades for meeting the standard. If you don't meet the standard, you get kicked out. So that's your options. But it's great meritocracy.
So, Nick, as a dietitian, were you actually able to apply anything which you preach when you were going through that? Or was it just a
Yeah,
case of hanging on?
I'll give my little kind of secret tip that I would give guys to Ranger Regiment after I got out, and I think people still use it. I don't know if they do, but you get these meals ready to eat, and food becomes a big focal point. And so there's a lot of trading going on, right? And so I would get something like M&Ms. M&Ms is like the equivalent of like, cigarettes, or so I'm told, in prison, that you can trade for anything with M&Ms. And so I would base my trades not on flavor, which most people do. They're like cravings, like I want chocolate. I would base my trades on calories. So there was something in the MRE called a dairy shake that was about 400 calories. M's only 210 calories. I'll make that trade every day, so I get more calories. I don't care about flavor. I was just trying to figure out ways to close the caloric gap, knowing that I had it. And so that was where I did my nutrition.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I've seen a few arduous courses, and some people are discarding their rations. They're just not taking in the recommended number of calories that maybe dietitians, nutritionists have figured out that that's what they need. Have you got any experience of avoiding that? I mean, how do you get people to eat as much as they can when they've given the food, but they are focused on flavor and they're just discarding them because they don't like the taste? Like, what would you do in that situation?
It comes out of education, and you know aligning that education with their goals. Be like, hey, is your goal to get through this course, or to do the best possible you can in this given amount of time? And usually the answer is yes. And it's like, well, then you need the fuel for it, because I'm telling you, the science shows, the research shows, your performance is going to degrade if you keep doing that. But that is a challenge, and it's a challenge everywhere. I'll give you a quick example of a great researcher there who's at Usarium. His name's Dr. Lee Margolis. He's a dietitian, but he did a study in Norway, like in the Norwegians going out into the cold. Man, they're great in the cold and burn a lot of energy. And so we found this energy gap between the rations they were getting and kind of what they were doing in the field. And so he's like, boom, hey, I got a solution. We'll just give them, supplement bars and other things to close that energy gap. And he repeated the study thinking, okay, hey, that should be done, like most of us would. They ended up just eating the bars and then not eating the ration. So they were feeling an energy deficit. So again, there is a little bit of, like, to your point, like, you got to educate, you got to motivate. And just because you give somebody a ration doesn't mean they're going to eat it. So just understanding that.
I suppose it goes a lot around the importance of palatability of rations and what you get in there. Because I think, I don't know if you've ever seen the emergency rations, which sometimes aircrew get issued, and they've got like the tallow wax bars, and they're like, yeah, it's got loads of calories, eat that, it'll square you away. Have you ever tried to eat something that's just tallow wax or tallow fat? Yeah, the palatability is not there, so it can have all the calories under the sun, but again, are the individuals going to eat it?
And that's coming from a Scotsman. The stuff
I know, mate,
that you've eaten growing up, JP.
See if
that
it'd been
must
battered.
be bad.
If it'd been battered, covered in chippy sauce, I was over it, but hey.
Yeah, and we've done. There's been a lot of research here looking at that. Is like, when you have soldiers in the field and you have them on MREs long enough, their energy intake will go down, and that energy expenditure doesn't. But if you serve them like hot food, like if you're able to get like hot food out in the field, intake goes back up. So yes, understanding that we're dealing with humans, not machines.
Nick, obviously, once you got in the Ranger Regiment, you're part of a pretty cool project, which is still running to this day, in the form of the Ranger Athlete Warrior Initiative. And I remember when I first came across this, that must have been 16, 17 years ago, and obviously it was in its infancy. But it stood the test of time, arguably. So it'd be real interesting if you could give us an insight into what is the RAW, and why it was developed, and what it consists of.
Yeah, so the Ranger Athlete Warrior program was a concept. It was later General LeCamera, then Colonel LeCamera, who's the regimental commander, and so he looked across the force from what I was told, and would see if Rangers had squad leaders that loved to run, they ran all the time. If they loved to lift, they lift all the time. But we were doing the same missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, so that obviously it makes sense. So he brought in experts, and one of which, and one name I do want to throw out there because everybody should know it, is Danny McMillan. So Danny McMillan is a physical therapist that brought in, brilliant guy. He's got his doctorate and came in and built this program kind of from scratch. He hired me. He hired an occupational therapist by the name of Rob Montz. we had an NCO because you need a non-commissioned officer to keep the officers in line, so we didn't go well. So we had a guy, Master Sergeant Matt Wilson, who was a longtime Ranger, complete, stud, did best Ranger, like, that when you think of like the warfighter Ranger, it was him. So we had that common sense, that Ranger common sense that if we were thinking about trying things or doing something, you give it the old Matt Wilson pressure test, and really quickly he would tell you if it was, dumb or not. And so having that group, and that was the initial group, and then we later other people were definitely involved. But that was the nucleus. And we sat down and we were trying to design a holistic program that addressed mental toughness, right? Which is this nebulous term. Then nutrition. So that was where I came in. Physical training, and then sports medicine. The rehab point of it is getting after that early on. And so with those four pillars, we went out and we looked at the Olympic Training Center. So we went there. We went to the University of Georgia college team that's here, kind of big in the U.S. and looked at, okay, what are they doing for sports medicine? What are they doing for nutrition? We looked at other units. What are they doing and other professional programs? And we took the lessons learned from that, and then we applied it and kind of created this human performance program.
Nick, I've got a background in sport and working in the defence area at the moment now. I'm interested to hear your experience of what did you think would work from a sports situation that just did not work when you put it in front of a bunch of men and women in uniform. I've seen some of the things that I would have done with an athlete, with a rugby player, with a football player, just doesn't work in this environment. Did you have anything in a similar sort of vein?
There was one thing we tried, and I think it came from sports, and I don't know if it came from soccer or rugby or something, but it was called the Ring of Fire. Okay, and it was this big ring with
Probably rugby.
with rubber bands on it, right? So think resistance bands, and you would get out in a formation, and we all would like, wrap our bands around our waist and do different lunges and stuff all in the center of the ring. And it was thought, oh, this will be brilliant because squads can just take these, rings out and have resistance training out in formation. It was like the worst received. I won't even tell you some of the names that got called, but culturally, it just didn't, and this was going to be a core, part of our training initially. Like it was programmed in, like you're always going to do the Ring of Fire or whatever. And quickly, that is one area where I'll give us credit is when we saw like, Rangers weren't taking to it. And if there's anybody that listens to this, old Rangers that might remember it. Yeah, we're like, all right, we gotta throw that out. The Ring of Fire isn't working.
What challenges did you find when you came out with the Raw initially? Were the guys receptive to the program, or was there a bit of a pushback?
I mean, no, because it's change, and anybody who's been in the military or worked for the government, you know how well change goes over, right? Right. And I mean, one of the first questions I got when I had to go through this board to get into Ranger Regiment. And I remember they're like, "Hey, and the basic question was, we've been kicking ass and doing great without a dietitian for all these years. Why do we need you?" And that's a fair point, and that was a little bit of the attitude, right? They're like, "Hey, we know how to train. We've been doing training. We've been doing great." And so there was a bit of a selling, and there was a bit of communication, and what we learned too, like with buy-in. And one of the biggest things, and I tell people who work in the military now who are kind of trying to get their programs to take off. I'm like, find your champions. And so we would find these Rangers who are absolute beasts, right? That everybody looked to, like that person that, you see them in the gym and everybody wants to be them, and get them sold on Raw, explain to them why we're doing it, kind of showing those things and all like that. And then they would go out and be our champion. And then it really helped us catch momentum because they'd be like, oh, that guy's doing it. Oh, that guy's doing it. Okay. If that guy does it, is got to be good. So there was a lot of marketing that we did, which I think sometimes we forget, you know, in terms, especially in the military, that there can be this attitude like, well, this is the way it is. This is doctrine, or, I have this background in sports, or I know this, or I know that. And it's like, no, man, you got to still get buy-in from the guys who are actually doing it, the guys and gals.
Yeah, I see that. I see that all the time. Yeah, the role models is really important. I'm intrigued, Nick. You asked that question in your interview. Why do they need you? Why do they need a nutritionist? I'm intrigued. What was your answer then? And now, what would your answer be with experience and you've lived it? What was your answer and
Yeah.
how's it changed?
What was I had to tap dance around that. I was trying to think exactly what I said. The point was, okay, you have baseline, but there's always kind of an optimization, right? And so I was there to make him even better, to take him to another level. I'm sure there was a better way to say that, but that was my main thesis of, hey, you guys are great, you guys are awesome. I want to make you more awesome,
Polish
right?
that ego first.
Yeah, yeah, right. And then also there's a component of, you know injuries are going to happen. Can it help with healing and all those sort of things? You guys are going out there all the time, and then keep you healthy, keep you from getting sick, because the best athletic ability is availability. So if you're getting sick, those sort of things. So that was kind of frame it. I would still frame that today is, let's optimize, right? Let's see where we can do everything better, because just like when these guys are going out to the shoot house, or they're doing all these things, it's like they already know how to shoot, right? Everybody in the military, well, most people in the military, but especially in like special operations, everybody knows how to shoot. Why do they go to the range so much? It's like that 1% getting better every time. And so that's the same thing with nutrition. We can find that and hone that.
Nick, when you developed the raw initial, it went through a number of evolutions. I think he's ended up on version 4. What were those evolutions, and what was sort of driving it as you were pushing it through?
Feedback. Feedback. So again, it's kind of wild to think, like, when we came up with the assessments that we came up with, it was like 3 4 dudes in a room going, okay, we need to assess agility. What should we do? And looking in the books and looking at different assessments, asking, calling, what teams do. Okay, some people over here do the Illinois agility, some do the 5 10 5, some do and all those assessments. And so we took all those assessments, put them on some slides, briefed the commander, at the time, the regimental commander, and said, here's the assessments we can use. This is the one we recommend. What's your decision? And that's how it went. And then we put it out there. And so I use the assessments just because it's the cleanest example. You know, like with like deadlifts, he was worried about people hurting their back. So it's like, no, let's not do a max. Let's do, I think it was, well, we don't want to do a barbell. We want to do this like hammer deadlift thing at 255. Okay. So we're like, all right, let's do that. That's our assessment. It was too light. Guys were doing like 60 reps. And so we're like, all right, this is no longer assessing strength. This is muscular endurance. We need to go to a barbell. Okay, if we go to a barbell at 225, can we do that? All right, we change the assessment. Same thing, guys are doing reps. And so then we're like, all right, let's use a trap bar and do a 3 repetition maximum. All right, that's. And so a lot of those, especially the assessments, a lot of it was just learning from the field. Just, you employ something, you go out there, or you find an assessment. Like a great assessment was the backward overhead medicine ball throw. Everybody loves that thing where you throw it as far as you can. It just takes a lot of time. It just takes, and so we're like, let's go broad jump and see if we can speed up these assessments. And so there's just a lot of little things like that.
Were you assessing anything nutritionally? Do you do like food diaries, or were you doing bloods? From a dietetics sort of point of view, what were you assessing in that space?
We At the time we used the bod pod, we used the body composition. So that was the main thing. I mean, nutrition struggles. We struggle. I mean, I'm so envious
Same
of
as
strength and
psychology,
conditioning.
same as psych.
It's like, yeah, right. Like you have all the questionnaires, and um, I would argue at least you got more validated questionnaires than we have. I mean, you've got Big Five and all that. But so we it was really body composition was kind of the main thing. I would do dietary recalls. I could take a dietary recall, enter in some software, and look at the vitamins and minerals. I did that a little bit. Wasn't using blood. We started using blood a little more towards the end. If I went back, that would be my go-to now. I mean, but the blood thing, I'm using that a lot more. But again, you got to think this is 2007 to 2012. It was still not. Uh, Blood wasn't as kind of ubiquitous with human performance as it is today.
Yeah, I think different countries have different regulations about what they can and can't do. I know like body composition, I think, seems to be
Yeah,
well.
it's the yeah, and don't get me wrong, it was tough because guess what? Most Rangers are lean. It wasn't like it was they're lean and they got muscle.
Nick, on that, just a curiosity question. So, if you had guys or girls who were going forward for ranger training, did you ever give them advice as in to almost fatten up, given they were going to be in such a
Yeah,
massive caloric energy deficit?
I've been asked that. I would never do because again, I look at it in energy expenditure and then what you're gonna do because that's more mass you got to move, right? That load you've got to move. So I would definitely want somebody at a caloric surplus for the training in terms of making sure as you're training up and getting prepared for it, you're not cutting or anything, losing weight. But I never really bought into the fattening up per se too much just because that's it's going to be more energy expenditure moving that mass, right? Right. And then like with the 5 mile run, I was one, and again the assessment might have changed, but when I went through, it was a 5 mile run, in a certain time frame, and so somebody gaining some fat that might affect the run, it might affect other things. So it was more of just eat enough calories for your training, and then the big thing I would really harp on was not so much worrying about those time components, but do a lot of injury prevention work, do a lot of stabilization, the not so sexy stuff, because and it that's what I did. I did a lot of injury prevention work, kind of core stability and all. And I was thankful because when I, got to mountains, I remember we had one guy who unbelievable individual, would have graduated and all, but it was just he got off balance and dropped his leg in a hole and broke his ankle, and now he's out. And I'm not saying you could have prevented that with stability work or stuff, but that sort of stuff takes a lot of people out that people don't think about. So the more you can work on your stability under load, the better off you are.
So lean into that question a little bit, purely from a supplements or food first type approach. Imagine a scenario: you've got an individual comes to you, they've put the paperwork in, and in 6 months' time, they're loading onto one of these physically, mentally demanding courses, like the range school that you talked about. You've got a blank canvas. They've got very little understanding of dietetics or nutrition. I mean, what are the big stones? Like, what are the big rocks that you want them to know, so that within those next 6 months, they're doing the right thing nutritionally?
Yeah, I would
Big
start
question,
with
but
no, no. Hey, I'm gonna talk to them about not gonna be anything probably surprising. I'm gonna talk to them about protein and recovery and making sure they got a good high quality sources of protein on their plate at all those meals. Looking probably depending on their size, 20 to 30 grams every meal, maybe 30 to 40, depending. Talk to them about carbohydrates and getting adequate amount of that on their plate as well. If they're doing a lot of rucking and training volume, it might be 6 to 8 grams per kilogram of body weight. But then, not just saying that to them, I would show them what that would look like. Like, okay, this is what your plate looks like. Your plate might be half rice, right, or half pasta. And those hard training days, a quarter of that. Let's get some good, high quality, lean protein. Hopefully, there's not a vegan, because that makes it a lot harder. They'll eat, an omnivore. I want to work with omnivores. Meat, all the essential amino acids, so much easier to do. Um, and then the other piece is I'm going to talk to them about color on their plate, those phytonutrients, because help them from getting sick, help them to recover. And then lastly, hydration, which gets underutilized a lot, even still today. I'm surprised. Is all right. Let's take your body weight. We'll cut it in half. Give it to that's what you should be getting in ounces every day. That's the baseline. And then for your training, weigh yourself before and after. And I want you to drink 16 to 20 ounces for every pound lost. And so those are the big rocks and the basics. If you've got enough fuel, get enough protein to kind of repair, maybe hit some healthy fats as well. And then your hydration status, you're good to go.
that's good advice. I don't know, it's a modern myth, I guess. I don't know if people ever do this, but there's certain courses that I've seen and they're in an area of the country where there's a pub, and it used to be that people would just drink Guinness and they'd eat pasties, and it'd be some of the old and the bold. They'd be like, well, when I went through that course, I was on Guinness and pasties. Is there anything in that? Like, obviously very high, lot of meat in there. They've got, the Guinness, supposedly lots of iron. Is that good advice? I'm hoping you're going to say no.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, and this is the challenge, right? Is with like evidence and things. There's a lot of individuals who can do things in spite of their habits. I mean, I saw guys, to your point, like in our military when I first started out our 2 mile run, I would see guys go like 11-minute, 12-minute 2 miles and smoke a pack of cigarettes. Now, does that mean the cigarettes help them run faster, like open up their lungs? No, but and also people forget, like, what's the military age? Like your 20s. People are indestructible in their 20s. You can do a lot of bad things to your body when you're in your 20s and get away with it. The problem is, I would want to go find that person who did what is it, the Guinness and then the pasties. So I would argue maybe all right, in their 20s they probably do it and get away with it, but okay, that individual, especially if they're still trying to be an operator in their 30s or 40s, what does that look like? And probably not as good as it could have if they did better nutrition practices in their 20s.
Said that because now I can go back with the answer when someone tells me that they survived on Guinness and pasties and they're fine.
Nick, on that, do you think it's more realistic to apply that sort of 80-20 rule? So 80% of the time if they're eating mild mega, and then 20% of the time if they want their pasty in the Guinness, that's all right.
Yeah, no,
on occasion.
Yeah, I mean, research with alcohol it's not a performance enhancer, right? Definitely all the things, but also understand culturally. I also understand that getting the team together and having a meal and having a celebration, like that's part of the unit camaraderie and cohesion. That's part of it, and I wouldn't try to take that away. But 80% of the time, he said, okay, let's do this, let's be dialed in. But after a hard training rotation, after a deployment, after yeah, I definitely think give the folks a couple weeks to unwind and do their thing, and then it's like, okay, let's get back.
So Nick, this has been another fascinating conversation that I love talking to people like you. I always learn so much. So massive appreciation. Thank you for coming on today. What we like to do is to offer it over to you to wrap the episode up for us and give us some of your closing thoughts, some wise words that maybe you've not given us yet, or maybe it's to reinforce something that you want people to really understand and learn. So Nick, over to you. How do you want to finish today?
Yeah, and this might be a little, biased as a dietitian, but I still think even in the US, I know the dietitians in the military are probably underutilized. And so for any of the folks, those tactical athletes out there listening to this, is go find you a good nutritional professional and work with them and give it a few months. Because here's the other thing with eating healthy and doing all those things, it doesn't happen overnight. You're not going to eat some broccoli or some blueberries and be like, oh my God, this is amazing. So you got to give it some months. So find a nutrition professional, work with them 3-4 months and see how you feel. Because I can tell you from my experience of working with clients or working with athletes, after you get them going and you start making those adjustments, they feel better. They're able to move better. They're getting sick less. It can affect the family too. Now, my family's eating a certain way. My kids are eating a certain way. They're doing better in school. There's all these other things that come from good nutrition. So if somebody's listening to this and currently their nutrition is not where it needs to be, go seek out a dietitian, a nutrition professional, and give it a whirl for 3 to 4 months, and report back to me and tell me how you feel.
Great advice. If anybody's interested in learning more about you and your research and things that you're up to, is there a way of them finding you online? How are they doing?
Yeah,
that?
I'm online. I'm at drnickbarringer.com. I got a website, nickbarringer.phd.rdn. That's on Instagram. And I'll post like research. You don't have to worry about me like, any singing videos or, things with my kid. I just use
You've
that.
just lost half the audience. They're not going to
I
sign
know,
up
they're
now.
like, oh no, but I just post science stuff on there.
Awesome. We'll get those in the show notes.
No,
Nick,
brilliant.
Thank you
Awesome
very much for
treatment.
your time. Have a great rest of the day.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you.
Thanks. That was Dr. Nick Barringer. If there's one thing that I've taken from this episode, it's that performance isn't just about the effort and the persistence and how hard you train. It's about how well you can support those things. Because the difference can be in the obvious things. It's in the consistency around the basics, the nutrition, the recovery. And ultimately, these are things that a lot of people ignore, they overstep. If you found this useful, please share it with someone who is training hard but might be overlooking this side of their performance. If you want more conversations like this, please make sure that you're following the Optimizing Human Performance podcast. You can find us on LinkedIn, you can find us on Instagram, or go to the Optimizing Human Performance website, www.ophp.co.uk. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.